Hi BookTube, this is Amy, and I think this is going to be a relatively quick Friday Reads this week. If you saw my video from earlier this week, I finished reading The Merry-Go-Round by W. Somerset Maugham, and I filmed a separate video on that book, so I won't be talking about that one here. But I will be talking about the other book that I've been reading this week, and that I'm about halfway, well no, more like 3/4 of the way through now, and that is Sentimental Tommy by J.M.Barrie. And this is an edition from 1896. Now you might recognize the name J.M.Barrie from Peter Pan. He is of course the author of that work, but as I've discovered recently, he wrote many other novels, including this one. And this one is the story of a young boy growing up by the name of Tommy. And Tommy and his younger sister Elspeth live in London to begin with, but soon find themselves back in Scotland in their mother's hometown. And it's little anecdotes from Tommy's life growing up, and it's actually quite humorous. We start off with an opening scene where Tommy is sitting on the staircase in this London apartment building. You get the sense that they are quite impoverished because his mother has told him not to let on to the neighbors that he's hungry. And of course his response is to go around saying, "I don't want any of your bread, I don't want any of your cheese," which of course infuriates his mother, because he is essentially announcing that he was told not to say that he wanted anything, which of course then reveals their poverty. His mother has quite a bit of pride. But this opening chapter, these opening few chapters are quite funny, because Tommy's mother is about to give birth, but he doesn't realize this, and so he is about 4 years old, 4 or 5, and he's sitting on the steps with some local boys who are English, and one of the boys says, "I just saw the doctor go up into your apartment. Either your mother is dead or dying, or she's going to give birth." And Tommy, not understanding, how children come into the world, says that he didn't see any new child in the apartment before he left, so therefore she must be dead. And not really understanding death, he takes a little pride in this moment when all the other boys think that his mother has died, because that makes him special in a way. It makes him someone to be respected and honored. And then of course that respect and honor completely disappear when they realize that nope, he's just going to have a sister. But he has this odd notion in his head of how siblings come to be in the family, and so he thinks that if he sits on those stairs, he can somehow block the passage of this new child, this new sister that is going to come into his life. And if he stops her from getting into the apartment, then he won't have a sister, and it will continue just to be him and his mother. And of course, from our perspective, this is absurd, but it makes sense to him as the child. And J.M.Barrie is very good at capturing that childhood perspective. And so it's quite hilarious when he indeed, out in the street outside the building, sees this tiny little girl wandering about. And he says to her, "Your mother isn't here. She's not your mother, she's my mother. But don't worry, I'll help you find a mother of your own." And so he takes this little girl off, thinking he can get rid of the sister. But you can only imagine his surprise when he comes home later and finds the baby in the apartment. And of course he sort of holds it over his sister's head all these years as they grow up, until of course they realize that that's not how children come into the world. He holds it over his sister's head, that the only reason she's there is because he got rid of the little girl who was supposed to have her place. He's claiming that the little girl he took off to some other house was supposed to take the place of his sister, and his actual sister Elspeth is, living with a stolen family. But there's other little bits here, when they get to Thrums, which is their mother's town, he is describing to his sister how grand it's going to be, and then they realize it's really nothing much. It's not as fantastic as they thought. It's not all the myths that their mother had told them. But so he one last ditch effort. Tommy says to his sister Elspeth, this is a great church, and the minister is a big, wise, tall man. And as he's explaining how big and tall the minister is, this, short, pudgy-faced, younger man comes out and hears exactly what Tommy is telling his sister, and of course becomes quite offended because he himself is the minister. And Elspeth and Tommy both kind of burst out in tears almost when they realize that this man is the minister, and the minister is not living up to their image of what the Thrums minister would. But we also get like subtle things about, jokes about society and whatnot. So the mother is, she's been gone for several years from her hometown, but she's been writing letters back, claiming to be so well off, claiming her husband is still alive, claiming her children have nurses and governesses and are going to private schools, when in reality they are living impoverished in a flat in London and nearly starving to death. But despite the depressing premise, it really is quite funny because of that childhood perspective. And it reminds me a lot of some of the novels of this era that were geared towards sort of a younger audience. Think like Little Women. It's got, those games and acting and little bits about books and friendship thrown in, but we've also got, the serious bits such as death and positions in society. So I'm really enjoying this one. I'm looking forward to finishing it, and of course this is a beautiful edition here with this gold on the cover and whatnot. So I'm going to finish reading that, but after I finish that, I'm going to read some of W. Somerset Maugham's short stories finally. And I have a Modern Library edition here, this great big volume. I would assume it's 2 to 3 volumes, but this is East and West and the complete short stories by him. So we'll see what I actually get in here. But this is a book that I've actually owned long before I ever read anything by him. And it's almost just by accident that I bought it. I saw it at the thrift store and said, ooh, a Modern Library. Let's jump on that, let's get that. And I am a liar. This is not Modern Library at all. It only looks like it. It is Doubleday and Company. But I think I probably bought it thinking it was Modern Library, just because it looks like an oversized version, sort of the Modern Library hardcover printings. But that aside, it looks like a great edition here of some of his short stories. And let's see, this is actually, it appears to be a 1934 printing here. So these are stories from between 1919 and 1931. I find this hard to believe this would be a 1934 printing, so I bet that's not the actual printing date, and that's just perhaps the last copyright date of one of these stories. But let's see, we've got The Pool, The Letter, Before the Party, The Force of Circumstance, The Outstation, The Yellow Streak, P&O, The Creative Impulse, The Hairless Mexican, Gulia Lazari, The Trader, Mr. Harrington's Washing. There's just a whole bunch in here, and I'm not sure whether I'll kind of read haphazardly or whether I will take a chronological approach here, but I do plan to dig into at least a couple of these short stories in the coming week. And then I think I'm finally going to get down to it and read some Trollope. I have about 6 books by Trollope on my shelf, but I keep telling myself that I haven't bought the perfect right one to start with yet. But I think I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to start with Phineas Finn, because I've heard good things about this one, and it seems like the reasonable place to start. So this one says, young Phineas Finn is an ambitious but penniless Irishman who becomes an MP quite by chance. His checkered career in Victorian high society and politics unfolds against the background of his love affairs with his childhood sweetheart and the bright and brittle young things of England's upper crust, and with the great ladies whose discreet support is so essential for a young politician on the make, who wield tremendous power behind the scenes. Here is Anthony Trollope at his most entertaining and sharp-eyed. So from what I understand, this is part of a series, possibly, but I've heard that it won't do too much damage to read it on its own. I'm running into a bit here with Trollope where I'm not sure what's connected to what, and I'm not sure I'm going to let it matter, because it wouldn't be the first time that I read a, quote, series out of order. Okay, yeah, here in the introduction it says that in 1864, the serial publication in monthly installments of Can You Forgive Her, the first of Anthony Trollope's Palliser or political novels. And then there was Phineas Finn, the Eustace Diamonds, Phineas Redux, the Prime Minister, and the Duke's Children. So I'm not sure how closely these novels are connected. If you've read these and you know how they're connected, let me know in the comments below. If I'm about to do something horrible by reading these out of order, warn me. Say, Amy, don't you dare read that one first. Read this one instead, and perhaps I'll take that into account before I start here, if I happen to have one of those other ones on my shelf here. So that is what I'm up to with my reading this coming weekend. As usual, I would like to know what you read in the past week, what you're planning to read this coming weekend, and whether you are familiar with any of the books that I just mentioned. I hope you all have a lovely Friday.